Phones. Annoying. I think I would have solved this problem already. Really, you'd be wrong. Aha. Best way to keep a phone up. Another phone. Yeah. Oh, dead phone gotta be used for something. Let's see if anyone shows up. Live. Give me 1 second. That's alright. Hello. Hello, Void. 4 o'clock on a Monday is a difficult time frame, I know. Let me check that real quick. Okay. Yeah, well, let's bring it over here so I can bug me some more, apparently. All right. Starting off with a really big thank you to all of you who took the time to watch the 2 of them last week. It means a lot that people, and I know I always say this, but it means a lot. It means a lot that people take time to watch these videos. Because right now, the last couple weeks especially, they've certainly been the best part of a day, so the fact that someone's taken time to watch them, and it just means a lot. I've got a few questions and a couple on comments and a couple else where I'm always willing to take more questions. Probably want to do, I hope to do at some point a Q&A, but that's obviously going to be down the line a little bit, but taking questions anytime between now and then. You know, when you have a lot on your mind, you have all these ideas, and then you go to, like, you start, and then you're like, what was I doing with this? Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So, the Lord is really faithful. Like, I let him down all the time. Like, I let him down all the time. I mean, for someone who's, belief as I can be, I struggle with a lot of things that I probably shouldn't, like reading daily or taking like intentional time out of my life to just sit and pray, be separate away from apps and things of that nature. Um, and it's really difficult. But um, but he's faithful. Like even when we let him down, he's never not going to be who he is. He's never not going to be love. He's never not going to be grace and justice and mercy and truth. He's never not going to live up to the promises that his word is full of. He's always going to be who he's always going to be. And that's just really, really awesome. So it's just really cool to like have like sometimes, especially I don't know if it's just me, sometimes you can take for granted the things you have when you lose them and not before. Like you can, okay, let me try that again. You can get so used to having, whether it's a phone or a laptop or you know a vehicle or whatever it may be. Everyone's life has different things, and then it's temporarily gone. Like, or something we all deal with at some point in time, health. Like we take good health for granted. A lot of people do. I know I do, physically at least. Take good health for granted, and then when it's gone, it's like, oh, well, I should have made better use of that when I had it. Or mental health, or whatever the case may be. Um, it's allowed me to the refocusing on that, to refocus me like, hey, like kind of what I was talking about last live stream from Philippians 4 about being thankful in all situations and giving everything to Him. The reason that those verses are some of my favorites is because the reason those verses are some of my favorites are because they're constantly challenging and refreshing and rewarding and sharpening all at the same time. Like, it's comforting that God wants us to hear everything that's on our hearts, but it's challenging to give everything to Him without also being anxious. Because if we're really being anxious, we're not necessarily always giving it to Him. It's well comforting to know that God has something in every situation, no matter how drastic and dire. But it's also challenging to rejoice in those situations. Like some days lately are just difficult, whether it's mental health, whether it's circumstances or lost friendships or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's just really, really, really challenging. But but His Word says, rejoice always. So even in the bad days, there's something. Even if it's just making it through the day, getting to the end of it, and laying down and having accomplished getting through the day. It's really awesome that God is faithful, regardless of us. Like, He is faithful. Like, God is faithful. Like, we can let Him down, and He still wants us, and He'll still give us another chance. I mean, there's always consequences in some capacity for our actions. Even if the consequences are the fact that He died for us and bled for us, and died for our sins. Even if that is the consequence, there's a consequence to every action. But He's so faithful that He just doesn't give up. He just doesn't let go. He just doesn't stop seeking after our hearts and seeking to be king and ruler and leader and head of our lives. He's faithful. Like, no matter what, He's faithful. And that's challenging and rewarding and refreshing all at the same time. Like, He's faithful. It's truly just mind-boggling. Like, why does He care so much to be consistently faithful? But that's because He loves us, and all the many other things that we also can take for granted very, very quickly and very, very easily. I'm trying to look up, there's a verse that's coming to mind, but I can't think of where it is. verse 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13 says, there is no temptation such as which there's no temptation taking you, or there's no temptation but such as is common to man. Like, God knows everything we're going to face, regardless of what it is, regardless of how temptation is what's left. Whatever it may be, God knows. It's like mankind repeats itself constantly. Anybody who's lived in it knows that it tends to repeat itself. But he says, but God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that which you are able. He's saying God is faithful. And here are proofs of God's faithfulness. There's many, many more, of course, but just in this verse, he says that he will not suffer you, or he will not permit you to be tempted above you are able. He's saying, regardless, we tend to short circuit ourselves when it comes to things like that. Sometimes we're overconfident, and we're like, oh no, this situation may have tempted me in the past, but I'm not going to this time, and then we fall, or nearly fall. And then there's times where we think, God, this is too much. Stop allowing these situations to happen. But it says here that God says you're able with his strength. He doesn't want you to rely on yours. He knows you are unable in and of yourself. That's why it's tied together with God's faithfulness. He says he won't allow you to be pushed beyond what you can do through him. But also it continues and says, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. He says, not only are you able to make it through it with the strength of the Lord and overcome it, but there's a way to overcome it. There's a way to pull through it. He's saying, with it, there's an escape hatch. There's a turn you can make. There's something you can do to survive it, to overcome it. There's always something. It's always possible. With God, all things are possible, and that's one of them for sure, that ye may be able to bear it. Paul writes the armor, and he says that you, above all else and after everything else, that you can stand. God is faithful. Great is his faithfulness. Jeremiah wrote that in Lamentations of all places. He's bemoaning and he is despairing of life itself, of what's happened to his country, of what's happened to its city, of what's happened to the people he cares about. And then he stops. He seems to stop mid-thought almost. And then he says, remembering mine of Lamentations chapter 3, starting with verse 18. I didn't expect to go here, but here we are. And I said, my strength and my hope is perished from the Lord, remembering mine affliction and my misery, the wormwood and the gall. My soul hath them still in remembrance, and is humbled in me. He is telling the Lord, he is talking of all of his personal and physical and emotional strife. Jeremiah is here in Lamentations, and it says, starting in chapter 3, verse 21, then he just kind of flips it. He said, this I recall, though, despite everything I've written for over 3.5 chapters worth, of course they didn't have chapters, but 3.5 chapters worth of letter writing, of poetry and prose and things of that nature. After everything, he's poured his heart out. He's a weeping prophet for a reason. And then he says in verse 21 of chapter 3 here, he says, this I recall to my mind, therefore have I hope. And then here's what he's recalling. Here's what he's recalling in his mind. Here's what's getting him through. God has brought him God has shown some manifold, unbelievable, excruciating circumstances, something many people will not face. He's talking about the loss of his home. And he's saying, but these physical pains, and I feel as if I have no, as all of, he writes just a few verses before, he's talking He's talking about the Lord. He's saying, a few verses before, verse 60, He hath broken my teeth with gravel stones. He hath covered me with ashes, and thou hast removed my soul far off from peace. Yeah, so much so he's forgotten prosperity. I mean, he is despairing in life, and yet he says here, just a few verses later, it is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed. Ties perfectly with Philippians 4, where Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. Paul is in prison. Jeremiah is facing the loss of city, the loss of home. The identity of a country is torn apart, and they both find the Lord in their circumstances. And Jeremiah here says, as bad as it is, and it is bad, I mean, it is really bad, the Lord has not taken all of our lives. There are still people living. There are still people surviving. There's still a remnant that's still there. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed. And he continues that thought, same verse 22, because his compassions fail not. He has compassion. Even in the midst of long overdue judgment, God showed Jeremiah and God showed people that he still is compassionate towards them. I mean, he could have wiped them all out, and there would have been anybody saying anything. He could have started over, but he didn't. He's allowing Jeremiah and all these people to survive this circumstance, and it says, we're in Lamentations. He says, are new every morning, and we get that that every people know, great is thy faith from. Smack dab in the middle of Lamentations, we get great is thy faithfulness. The most unusual circumstances. The most unusual circumstances that we wouldn't think faithfulness. Well, blessed be the name of the Lord. That's a hymn and that's a modern song. Where is that from? It's Job. Job's saying, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job said that after losing his children, after losing his livestock, after losing his well-being. Wife is like, just curse God and die. And he's like, no, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And we just sing those songs as if with no meaning and no purpose and no fullness of the understanding of what they actually come from. The writers may have had some understanding of it. We don't. We don't know losing everything and saying, you give and you take away. Blessed be your name anyways. We don't know loss of home and loss of national identity and saying, it could be worse. You still have compassion towards us and your faithfulness is still there. And we don't get it. I know I don't. I know the things that I complain about and whine about and ask the Lord about and yell at the Lord about and talk to the Lord about, they're not national identity and loss of house and things like that. To think that these people in the Bible, real life people in the Bible and after the Bible, are facing these circumstances and they're saying, God is enough. I mean, we know that hymn, it is well with my soul. This guy lost his daughters. His wife survived, his kids did not. And he goes back to this place where the shipwreck happened. And he writes that song from it. When peace like a river, and when sorrows like sea billows roll, like those dichotomy just seems so simple when you grow up or you hear it over and over again and it just becomes moat memory words. But it's like he lost his children and yet he saw the Lord in it. He's saying, regardless of whether the sea of life is peaceful or those sorrows come, well, it is well. I mean, we want to have that depth of faith and love and understanding and intimacy with the Lord, but we, any more than anybody else, cannot have that without going through experiences that teach us it. Jeremiah did. He lost his home. Paul did. He was jailed and beaten. We expect to have this deep relationship with the Lord just reading his word and praying and thinking that's going to be enough. And then when things go badly, we complain about it as if it's somehow his fault. I mean, he told his own disciples that in this world ye shall face tribulation, but be of good comfort, I have overcome the world. He's telling them at the same time, yes, it ain't going to be easy. These people hate me, they're going to hate you, and you will face tribulation. And most of them were killed. They were killed just for believing in the Lord. But he's saying, don't worry, I've overcome. And they saw that victory. And they had faith in that victory, and they lived with that victory the rest of their lives. But you know what they also saw? They also saw him on the cross. They also dealt with the persecution on many fronts throughout their lives that killed them. But we expect this intimacy, and I'm not innocent here. I'm just as convicted of this as anyone. But that we just want to have that intimacy. Paul writes in these letters about praying that these people would know him, like intimately, closely walk with him. He said that he wanted to throw everything aside and just pursue the Lord. But how did Paul get that? By losing everything. I mean, he talks in that same place where he's talking about I count all things but loss. He talks about all the things he lost. Like he had the heritage, he had the upbringing, he had the education, he had the status, he could have lived comfortably the rest of his life. But when God came in and what did he faced arrests and jail and beatings and being left for dead and being shipwrecked and eventually being killed. But Paul says here, I still want to know him. Like, oh yeah, these things are awful and they're not fun. We've been, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed. But he's saying the sufferings of this present world are not going to be compared with the glory that is to come. He said that because he understood it. God, may you help us understand that. You help me understand it, and those that watch this video, and even those that don't. Help us to be more willing to live like the people who lived before us, the examples that you have for us of faith and depth of intimacy with you, whether it's on the mountaintop, or as David writing in the valley of the shadow of death, or was Jeremiah's writing with his city falling apart, or Job with his family all but gone, or Paul from lack of freedom. God help us see more of you. He's really good. And remember, guys, he's faithful. God is faithful. I love all of you very much. And until next video or next week, stay focused. Really, really get to know him. Pray for me. I'll be praying for you. And, oh yeah, you're not alone.